Hi YouTube! So I've been working with a few breeders recently, and one thing I noticed is that a lot of people, they don't have a proper framework to think about breeding. And so what happens is that they make a lot of novice mistakes, such as breeding bad Axies and getting more rejects than they expected, or they pay too much for pure Axies and it just takes them a very long time to recuperate the investments. Now I hate to see people lose money. So in this video, I really hope to teach a 5-step process that will help you answer the questions of which parents you should breed, how many times you should breed them, and how best to maximize profits from your breed. Alright, so step number 1 is to determine the purity of the parents. This is something that is already well known to most breeders, but just in case, I'll reiterate how to do it over here. So first thing first, to be able to see the genes of the Axies in Marketplace, you need to download this thing called Freak Axie extension. Then you will be able to see the genes. You might notice that there is a purity number over here. Feel free to ignore that because the definition of purity that they use is different from how breeders traditionally define purity. The way to calculate purity is that you look at the genes, you subtract 3% for any undesirable gene in the R1 and 1% for any undesirable gene in the R2. So to give an example, over here we are looking at Porky Aquas. So Risky, Porky, Balloon, Koi. These are the genes that we want on the Aquas. And then we would subtract 3% for any undesirable in the R1, 1% for any undesirable in the R2. So as an example, the Axie we're looking at over here, we minus 3 for Silent Whisper, minus 3 for Oranda, so minus 6, minus 3 for War Gecko, minus 12, minus 1 for Razorback, minus 10, minus 1 for Eggshell, minus 11, minus 1 for Garish Worm. So that makes it a minus 12. So this would be an 88% purity aqua. Of course, also note that sometimes we don't minus a gene just because it's different. Sometimes there are genes in the R1 or R2 that are different but still desirable. For instance, let's look at this Axie over here. It has a lamb instead of a risky fish gene in the R2. But is that actually undesirable? No. We are perfectly fine with having a lamb on this aqua. In fact, if anything, lamb prices are probably higher than risky fish prices. So we wouldn't subtract for this inappropriate gene because it's perfectly fine. Alright, so the next step is to calculate the probability of hitting what we want. So if we decide to breed the two cheapest Axies over here, what do you think is the probability of getting a desirable child? Well, we could always go to Axiezone's breeding simulator, plug in those two Axies, out comes the probabilities. So a novice breeder, they will take a look at this and think, hey, this looks pretty good, right? Even in the worst case, there's still a 75% chance of getting what we want. Yeah, I think I like the odds of this. Maybe about 60% chance total of getting the exact same child back. Unfortunately, the real probabilities are much lower than that. So the way it works is that to calculate the probability of getting the exact same child back, you gotta multiply the probability of all the genes, all the different parts together. And sadly, that only works out to about 37% chance of getting the child that you want. So just to briefly explain this a bit, the mouth part is 78% because we're fine with both Risky Fish and Priana. Ears and eyes are 91% because we're fine with really any aqua ears and any aqua eyes. And so we might have to multiply these probabilities together and we get 37%. So the real killer over here is because of the horn in the mouth. Both of them have probabilities in the 70s, and that's just really bad. So in general, it's better to have all the parts highish, so numbers like in the 80s, rather to have like high and low, numbers in the 90s and numbers in the 70s. Why? Because that's just the way probability works. When you multiply two middle highish numbers, for instance 0.8 multiplied by 0.8, you get 0.64. But if you multiply a high number and a low number, 0.9 multiplied by 0.7, you get 0.63 instead, a lower number. So in general, you want all of your parts to be high-ish. Alright, so this brings about the principle of complementary genes. What this means is that it's better to breed Axies who have their impurities in different slots rather than Axies who have their impurities in the same slot. Let me give an example. Let's look at these three Axies over here. 90, 91, 90 purity. So how do you decide which Axie to breed with which? Well, let's take a look at their genes. So this Axie is the 91 purity Axie. Its impurities is in the mouth slot, cute bunny and razor blade. Nah, we don't want those. So which one should we breed it with? If we look at this one, 90% purity, but the impurity is in the tail slot, tawny caterpillar, swallow. Whereas this one, the impurity is in the mouth slot, confident and catfish. So by the principle of complementary genes, we want to breed this with an Axie with their impurity in a different slot. So this one, the impurity is in the tail slot. So let's look at the numbers. This pair is the one with different impurities. This one is the one with the same impurities. And we can see that yes, by breeding the ones with different impurities, the probability 53% is higher than the other one, which is 52%. Alright, so step number 3 is to figure out what is the cost of breeding. So here we have the cost of all your different Axies, and what we need to figure out is the breeding depreciation cost. So once you breed your virgins, they become non-virgins. How much can you sell them for? So if we look at the non-virgin floor price, floor is at about $250 at the moment. So let's use that as our non-virgin floor price. The breeding depreciation cost would just be the cost of the virgin minus the non-virgin floor price. Next, we need to factor in the cost of the SLP and AXS used to do your breeding. If you want those numbers, you can always go to Axie Tech. They will give you the numbers over here. We use those numbers. And then ultimately what we want to find out is the combined cost per breed. So this is simply the Axie breeding depreciation cost plus the cost of your AXS and SLP divided by the number of breeds you have. And this will give you the per breed cost. So if you notice that the breeding cost actually decreases for the first few breeds before increasing again. And this is simply because you're spreading out the depreciation cost over more number of breeds. So for the first, second, third breed is actually the lowest cost per breed. And then after that, your SLP and AXS cost starts to ramp up, and that's why the cost starts to increase again. Alright, step 4, calculating the probability adjusted revenue. So this concept is pretty simple. We breed 2 Axies, let's say, we have a 43% chance of getting the Axie that we want. We look at what is the average cost you could sell a virgin for. Probably about 300 or so, that's pretty safe estimate. The other 60% of the time, you're going to get trash, just breeding rejects. You have to sell them at floor price, which is currently about $80 or so. So your probability adjusted revenue, 40% times 300, 60% times 80. That will give you about $170 or so. Alright, and lastly we get to step 5, calculating the profits. Now we get to the fun stuff. Everyone loves to talk about profits. So this is a pretty simple concept. You take the probability adjusted revenue minus the cost of breeding. So we can find the profit per breed, and then we just multiply that by the number of times you're breeding to get the total profits. So what we care about is to maximize the total amount of profits. And so from here we can actually see what is the optimal number of times to breed. We see that yes, it's optimal to breed this 4 times in order to maximize total profit. Alright, so now that we have our framework, let's put it to use and try and figure out what's good to breed. So here we look at a few cases. Case number 1, the cheap stuff, the budget option. What do we get when we breed the cheapest Axies around? So here we model it up. Yes, the probability is low. There's only a 37% chance to get what we want. But hey, the cost is cheap as well. There's basically no depreciation. Net result, yes, it's still profitable to breed these. Max profit at 3 breeds for $160. But of course, not all of us like the cheap stuff, right? Some of us are a bit more premium, we're a bit more upscale, we want to look at more fancy stuff. So next case, let's look at the 90% Axies. So here we model the numbers. Yes, probability has increased, 50% chance. but of course the Axies are a bit more expensive. But net, it's more profitable to breed these Axies. Max profit at 4 breeds, you can make a $200 from this, better than the budget options. Now the real elite breeders, they're going to look at your 90% Axies and they think, hey man, this is trash, I don't want no cheap Axies. For them, they go for the premium stuff, they look at the 96% Axies. Now this stuff, we model it up, the probability is actually pretty decent, like 70% chance to get what you want. But of course these Axies, they are really expensive. Net result, you're not gonna make much money from doing this. But of course the trick here is that if you breed these Axies, the virgins that you're going to get, they're gonna have pretty good genes as well. You're not going to sell them for 300, you can probably sell them for 400. Here you start to turn a profit. If you're good, you can probably even sell them for 500. After all, you bought those Axies for 500, so there's probably going to be the demand for them. And here that's where the premium really starts to show. You can really start to make such serious money from selling these premium Axies. 5 breeds, make $500. That's the premium right there. Even if you don't sell the 500, let's say 450, 400. I mean, these are pretty decent numbers. You can match like what the middle and the budget options were making. And one thing about this is that the certainty of getting these results is much higher because there's a much higher chance of getting the Axies you want, 72%. Whereas if you look at the budget option, 30% chance of getting what you want. For 3 breed, that basically means that in the 3 times that you breed, you basically have to hit at least one, or you're going to lose money. So there's that variance, there's the uncertainty around this case. But hey, I mean, given how popular gacha games are, I think there's a bit of gamble in all of us. All of us like a good punt every now and then. So basically, that's the end of this video. I hope you like this framework teaching you how to find good Axies. If you really like the content, please leave a like and subscribe. That really helps me produce more of such content for you guys. Thank you very much.